Welcome to OOTO TV, the out of the office investigation from the past into the future of personal health and actualization. This time we're discussing dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito borne illness. Hello, everyone. I'm Sue, and welcome back. Our mission today, well, it feels incredibly relevant, almost literally on our doorstep. We are looking into the growing public health challenge from dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, let's call them DZC. And we're focusing specifically on the threat, which is really ramping up across California and also in nearby Baja California. We've gathered a lot of material, everything from global public health reports to some pretty cutting-edge genetic research.
And I'm Bob. And I agree, this conversation is just essential. Because DCC, it's not just some far-off problem anymore. It's genuinely an established risk right here locally. So today, we'll explore how these specific arboviruses, these insect-borne viruses, actually spread. And importantly, the unique symptoms that make them so dangerous, sometimes hard to tell apart. And then we'll get into the strategies for control the whole spectrum, really, from simple things in your backyard to some pretty futuristic science.
Exactly. We'll kick off by looking at how these invasive Aedes mosquitoes, the vectors, have really settled in here on the West Coast. Then we'll pivot to the serious clinical side of DZC, how it impacts people and, frankly, strains healthcare. And finally, those revolutionary control methods, gene drives, Wolbachia, some really fascinating stuff happening globally.
Okay, let's start with the mosquito itself, the vector. Because that's where the danger really begins, doesn't it? When the mosquito carrying these viruses gets established right here in our communities, it's fundamentally a vector issue, but one that's been massively accelerated by things like climate change, global travel, and just how we live now, urbanization.
Right. And we need to grasp the actual mechanism. So how can dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness occur from a mosquito bite? What's actually happening there?
Well, it comes down to the specific biology who's involved. It's different from, say, West Nile virus. WNV needs Culex mosquitoes and birds as a sort of amplifier host. But these DZC viruses, and dengue is the classic example, they can go directly human to mosquito to human. So if an infected person travels here, maybe to California, and gets bitten by one of these local invasive mosquitoes, that mosquito basically becomes infected, a little virus factory. Then it bites someone else, a neighbor perhaps, and passes it on.
And the main culprits are these Aedes mosquitoes, specifically Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus. They might during the day too, which is different. What makes these particular invasive ones so effective?
Well, their adaptation is just incredible. They are hyper-specialized for living with humans in our cities and suburbs. They don't need big swamps or ponds. No, they lay these eggs that are remarkably tough. They can dry out and survive.
Survive drought.
Yeah, desiccation resistant. And they lay them in tiny hidden water sources. We're talking artificial containers, like bottle caps, old tires, the saucers under plants.
Just tiny amounts of water.
Exactly. Really small spots. And we have to put this in the California context, right? While DZC is definitely a growing threat, we can't forget West Nile virus. That's still our most common serious mosquito-borne illness here, spread by the native Culex. 2023 saw a lot of WNV activity, 433 human cases, actually. 2024 was lower, 129 cases reported. But the risk is always there. It just shows the background mosquito threat we live with.
Okay, so we have that baseline. Now add these invasive Aedes mosquitoes into the mix. They're established now in, 24 California counties. That's significant. And we're seeing dengue actually starting to spread locally. You mentioned travelers.
Right, fueled by huge outbreaks happening right now in Latin America. It's a major issue there. So in 2024, we had a record number of travelers coming back diagnosed with dengue. And that led directly to 18 reported cases where people got infected here in California, locally acquired.
So the vector is here, the mosquitoes are established.
Yes.
And people are constantly bringing the virus in. The introductions are frequent.
Precisely. And then you layer on environmental factors that just make it worse. Extreme heat waves, they stretch out the mosquito season, give them more time to breed and bite. Climate change connection right there.
And the drought paradox.
Yeah.
People storing water.
Yeah. If households store water because they're worried about drought, they might accidentally create more breeding sites right around their homes. It's an unintended consequence.
Wow. And even destruction plays a role. You mentioned wildfires.
It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? But yeah, think about areas hit by recent wildfires in Southern California, like the Eaton Fire area or near the Palisades Fire. Destruction happens. Properties might be unmaintained for a while. Abandoned swimming pools turn green. Other containers fill with stagnant water.
Creating perfect breeding grounds.
Millions of mosquitoes, potentially. It just compounds the risk when communities are already dealing with recovery. It's complex, a real public health challenge stacking up.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's focus on the human impact. When we talk about DZC, the clinical symptoms, well, they can overlap quite a bit. And that makes diagnosis really challenging for doctors, especially if they're not in an area where these are common.
Right. So let's break it down. What are key elements for dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness?
Yeah.
What defines them?
Well, the baseline similarity is crucial. Dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness creates fever-like symptoms that can become serious illness. That's the common thread. But how it gets serious and the specific features, that's where they differ. Okay, let's start with dengue then. You said it's the most widespread.
By far. Globally, it's huge. Estimated 390 million infections a year. It's the most significant arthropod-borne viral disease in humans. Dengue is famous for that high fever, the really bad frontal headache, pain behind the eyes, retroocular pain.
And the nickname break bone fever. That sounds intense.
It really is. It comes from the severe muscle and joint pain, myalgia and arthralgia. People feel like their bones are breaking.
Oof. But there's a twist with dengue, right? Something about immunity.
Yes, and this is critically important and dangerous. There are 4 different types, or serotypes, of the dengue virus. If you get infected with one serotype, say DEN1, you get lifelong immunity, but only to DEN1.
Okay.
Now, here's the kicker. If you later get infected with a different serotype, like DEN2, your risk of developing severe dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome actually goes up.
Up. How does that work?
It's a phenomenon called antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE. Basically, the antibodies from your first infection, instead of neutralizing the new virus, accidentally help it replicate more efficiently. It's like they open the door for it.
Wow, that's a serious complication. How do doctors spot the danger signs?
Well, one early clue during the fever phase is a drop in the white blood cell count leukopenia. That raises suspicion. But the really critical phase, the dangerous part, often happens paradoxically when the fever starts to go down.
When you think you might be getting better.
Exactly. It lasts maybe 24 to 48 hours. And that's when you can get plasma leakage from blood vessels, potential bleeding, and even vascular shock. It requires close monitoring.
Okay, so that's dengue. What about chikungunya? What's its main feature?
Chikungunya's hallmark is the potential for chronic, disabling pain. The acute illness starts suddenly, with fever, yes, but also severe joint pain, polyarthralgia, or even arthritis. It's known for being debilitating.
Primarily hands and feet, you mentioned.
Yes, mainly the small joints of the hands and feet. And the really tough part is, this isn't always short-lived.
It can linger.
Absolutely. For a significant number of people, maybe 25 to 34%, that severe joint pain can persist for months, even years. It leads to chronic post-CHIK musculoskeletal disorders. It's a huge burden on quality of life and, ability to work. Turns an acute infection into a long-term problem.
A long-term drain, okay. And then there's Zika. You called it the neurotropic threat.
Yeah, neurotropic, meaning it has an affinity for, it targets nervous tissue. Now, most people infected with Zika don't even have symptoms. They're asymptomatic. But when symptoms do occur, it's often a maculopapular rash that's present in like 90% of symptomatic cases, plus fever, some joint pain, and maybe non-pus-filled conjunctivitis, red eyes.
But the neurological connection is the real worry.
That's the critical part. In adults, Zika infection has been linked to Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS. That's where the immune system attacks the nerves, potentially causing paralysis.
And for pregnant women.
That's the most devastating connection. The virus can cross the placenta and infect the developing fetus. This can cause severe congenital abnormalities, most famously microcephaly, where the baby is born with a significantly smaller head and underdeveloped brain, but also other issues like intrauterine growth restriction.
The Brazil outbreak really highlighted this, didn't it?
It absolutely did. In 2015, Brazil reported a rate of microcephaly cases that was like 20 times higher than what they normally expected. The link became tragically clear.
So the evidence is just stacking up. We have to state this clearly. Exposure to dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness is a high risk.
Undeniably. Globally, think about it, 2.5 billion people live in areas where dengue is a risk. And DZC as a group is an active, escalating threat across the Americas. It's not theoretical.
Which leads to the hard question. Can dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness cause injury and death?
Yes. Unequivocally, yes. And the data backs this up strongly. Dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness can be a high risk to various ages and to those with pre-existing illness. Severe dengue, if not treated properly and promptly, can have fatality rates over 20%. That's incredibly high.
And specific groups are more vulnerable?
Right. Small children seem to be at higher risk of developing shock from dengue. People with underlying chronic conditions, think asthma, diabetes, they're generally more vulnerable to severe outcomes from any of these.
Yeah.
And, as we just discussed, pregnant women face that extreme risk from Zika due to the potential for severe fetal abnormalities. The stakes are incredibly high for them.
And another crucial point we need to make is about the reported numbers.
Oh, definitely. It's vital to understand that dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness affect more than is reported. For dengue, maybe up to 75% of infections don't even cause symptoms, asymptomatic.
So people have it, can spread it via mosquitoes, but don't even know.
Exactly. And even when people do get sick with fever, it can be really hard to distinguish DZC from other febrile illnesses without specific lab tests, which aren't always available or done.
Misdiagnosis must be common.
Very common. So the official case numbers you see, whether globally or even locally here in California, they almost certainly underestimate the true scale of the problem, the true burden these viruses impose. The iceberg beneath the surface is much larger.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow.
Okay, so given this really complex and, frankly, concerning risk picture, let's turn to control strategies. And this is where things get really interesting, I think, because you see this fascinating contrast between very basic local actions and some incredibly advanced science.
Absolutely. It's kind of amazing. Let's start with the low-tech but high-impact stuff. Still the foundation, right?
Totally the foundation. The most effective way to avoid getting DZC is simple. Prevent mosquito bites in the first place.
Yeah.
So for residents here in California or down in Baja California, the message from public health is clear and consistent. Get rid of standing water. All of it.
Dump and drain. That's the mantra.
Dump and drain at least once a week. Check those plant saucers, buckets, tires, even bird baths need regular cleaning. Fix leaky faucets, clean out those clogged rain gutters. These aren't just chores, they're vital public health actions.
And personal protection.
Also key. Wearing protective clothing when mosquitoes are active. Remember, 80s bite during the day, so long sleeves, long pants. And using EPA-registered insect repellents. Things containing DET, picaridin, IR3535. Follow the instructions, but use them.
And there was a specific point about travelers returning.
Yes, really critical. If you travel to an area where DZC is endemic, especially Latin America right now with the ongoing outbreaks, when you return home, you need to keep using repellent for 3 weeks after you get back.
3 weeks. Why so long?
To prevent becoming the source of a local outbreak. If you were unknowingly infected while traveling, that 3-week period covers the time you might have the virus in your blood. Farina. Using repellent prevents local mosquitoes from biting you, picking up the virus, and then spreading it to your neighbors. It breaks the cycle right at the start.
Okay, that makes sense. Simple but crucial. Now, the high-tech end of things sounds like science fiction almost.
Some of it really does. We're essentially talking about genetic and biological warfare against the mosquito vector. There's ongoing research, like from the Alfie lab mentioned in the sources, exploring gene drives.
Gene drives?
Yeah.
How do they work, basically?
The idea is to create a genetic modification, maybe one that makes the mosquito unable to carry the virus, or maybe affects fertility and link it to a drive mechanism. This drive ensures the modification gets inherited by almost all offspring, not just 50%. So theoretically, you release a few modified mosquitoes, and the trait rapidly spreads through the entire wild population over generations. It's powerful, but also raises ethical questions, so research is careful.
Okay, that's research. What about things being used now? You mentioned Wolbachia.
Right, Wolbachia-mediated techniques. This is truly groundbreaking and already showing amazing results in the field. Wolbachia is a type of bacteria that naturally infects many insects, but not usually the Aedes aegypti mosquito we're worried about.
So scientists introduce it.
Exactly. They introduce Wolbachia into mosquito eggs in the lab, and it has these incredible effects. There are 2 main strategies being used.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is called the population replacement strategy, sometimes just called the replacement. Here, they release both male and female mosquitoes that carry Wolbachia. These mosquitoes breed with the wild population. The key is the Wolbachia bacteria inside the mosquito somehow block its ability to transmit viruses like dengue, Zika, and chikungunya. The mosquito's still there, but it's no longer dangerous in the same way.
Does it work?
Amazingly well. The source mentioned a big randomized controlled trial in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. They saw a 77% reduction in dengue cases in the areas where they released Wolbachia mosquitoes, and an 86% reduction in hospitalizations. Huge impact.
Wow, 77% reduction. That's incredible. What's the second strategy?
The second one is the incompatible insect technique, or IIT, sometimes called the destroyer. With IIT, they only release Wolbachia-infected males.
Only males. Why?
Because when these lab-reared Wolbachia-infected males mate with wild female mosquitoes who don't have Wolbachia, the eggs the female lays are not viable. They don't hatch.
Ah, so it's designed to crash the population.
Exactly. It's a population suppression strategy. Fewer mosquitoes mean less disease transmission.
Fascinating. Are there other high-tech tools besides Wolbachia in gene drives?
Yeah, a couple more worth mentioning. There's something called the Into-Care trap. It's a clever trap that uses an insect growth regulator, pyroproxyfen, and also a fungus, Bovaria bassiana, that kills mosquitoes.
How does it work?
A female mosquito lands on the trap, gets contaminated with both agents. The fungus will eventually kill her, but before that, she flies off and looks for other places to lay eggs. As she visits other small water containers, those cryptic sites we talked about, she actually transfers the larvicide, the pyroproxyfen, to those sites.
She spreads the larvicide herself.
Yeah, it's called auto-dissemination. She contaminates other breeding sites, killing larvae there too before she dies from the fungus, turns the mosquito against its own offspring.
That is clever. Any others?
There's also the RIDL technique that stands for release of insects carrying a dominant lethal gene. This involves releasing genetically modified male mosquitoes. They mate with wild females, but the lethal gene they carry causes their offspring to die before reaching adulthood.
Another population reduction method.
Right, but the catch with RIDL is you need to keep releasing the modified males continuously to keep the wild population suppressed.
Okay, so lots of advanced science happening. But
Yeah.
what about vaccines? Usually that's a major tool.
Ah, yes. And here's where we need that dose of contrarian reality, maybe.
Yeah.
Despite all this vector control innovation, the vaccine situation for DZC is, well, it's limited. The sources point out there's currently only one licensed vaccine for dengue called CYD-TDV, or Dengvaxia.
And it's not widely available.
Not in the U.S., no. It's approved in some endemic places, like Mexico, for certain age groups, typically 9 to 45 years old, who live in areas with high dengue rates. And importantly, its effectiveness varies quite a bit depending on the specific dengue serotype. And remember that ADE issue. There were concerns about using it in people who hadn't had dengue before.
So not a silver bullet.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And there aren't licensed vaccines readily available for Zika or Chikungunya yet, though research is ongoing. The World Health Organization is really clear on this. Vaccines, even when available, are just one part of the strategy. Vector control, all that work to reduce mosquito populations and prevent bites, remains absolutely paramount. You can't vaccinate your way out of this problem alone.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow. Okay, so as we start to synthesize all this, the picture that emerges is pretty stark, isn't it? Dengue, Zika, and Chikungunya, carried by these invasive Aedes mosquitoes, they represent a clear and definitely escalating danger, especially right here in California and Baja California, given the established vectors and the constant introductions through travel.
Absolutely. And let's quickly recap those mandatory points because they really capture the essence of the threat.
Yeah.
First, we confirm that DZC is indeed a high risk. It starts with those fever-like symptoms, yes, but it absolutely can progress to serious illness, cause lasting injury, and tragically even lead to death.
Right, thinking about severe dengue shock, that chronic crippling arthritis from chikungunya, or the devastating neurological impacts of Zika like microcephaly and GBS, the outcomes can be catastrophic.
Second key takeaway. The true global impact is massive, far bigger than the official numbers show. We established clearly that dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness affect more than is reported. That's because of all the asymptomatic cases and the challenges in diagnosis. This hidden burden makes it really hard to plan and respond effectively.
And third, the risk isn't uniform. We have to remember that.
Crucially, yes, we confirmed that dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and mosquito-borne illness can be a high risk to various ages and to those with pre-existing illness. Small children, people with chronic health conditions, and significantly pregnant women due to the Zika connection. These groups are particularly vulnerable and need focused protection. Vigilance is key for them.
What really strikes me, wrapping this up, is that paradox of control we talked about. On one side, you have this incredible, almost futuristic science, billion-dollar research programs developing gene drives, engineering bacteria like Wolbachia to block viruses inside mosquitoes. It's mind-bending stuff.
It really is. The cutting edge of biotechnology aims squarely at this public health threat. Yet, the immediate, practical defense, the thing that protects people today in California, it still relies heavily on that basic community effort. Just remembering to dump out a small cup of standing water in the backyard, fixing a leak, wearing repellent.
It's fascinating. Both ends of the spectrum. Advanced science and simple housekeeping are completely essential. We need both working together to protect public health from DCC. One can't replace the other right now.
Well said. So maybe final thought to leave you, our listener, with something to mull over. We know these three diseases, dengue, Zika, chikungunya, often circulate in the same regions at the same time. Co-circulation is common. And we know people can even get co-infected, have more than one at once, although it might be hard to diagnose. So the question is, what's the real, maybe hidden synergistic effect of facing this triple threat? What does it mean for long-term health, especially neurological health or chronic conditions for people living in or traveling to these high-risk zones?
That combined impact. Yeah, that's definitely something that needs more exploration. A sobering thought to end on.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this investigation.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow.